Call to order the Historic Preservation Commission meeting for Monday, September 9th. Have a roll call, please.
James Hensley.
Here.
Aaron Brown.
Here.
Patrick Kirk.
Here.
Valerie Duncan.
Here.
Adam Robb.
Here.
Lynn Bilodeau.
Here.
James Long.
Here.
Joe Chappell.
Present.
We have a full commission.
All right. Item 2 is discussion. This is our, for those of you out of the loop, this is our commission workshop, and I don't think I said that. Item 2 is discussion regarding the enforcement of the city's historic preservation ordinance and discussion and potential action on recommendations of amendments to existing district requirements. Staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple things I had hoped with this is obviously the workshop is to get feedback not only from the commission, but the property owners and business owners within the historic district. I was going to give kind of an overview on what I think are the key elements of the ordinance and that, and after that, leave it to the commission for any of their input or discussion or if there's specific items, and then obviously also let the public weigh in on any particular item that may come up or some of the things that they just generally want to speak about. Start off, I did send around 250 letters to, which would encompass most all, I hope I hit property owners and business owners within the historic district. I did get a few phone calls, a couple of them in panic because they thought it was a code enforcement letter, and so once they realized it wasn't, things went a little bit smoother. There were a couple actually that were like, oh geez, I think we're having an issue, and so we got that taken care of as well. So anyway, one of the things just in general that, you know, and I talked with some of the owners and business owners when they had called, one of the things that I had hoped with is it would start a line of communication to where they would, you know, would call me, call my staff, find out, is this something I need a permit for? Is this going to be okay? Whatever the case may be, but to have that line of communication to where we don't have where they're thinking, oh, I'm not going to call the city, they won't talk to me, or they're going to be mean to me and all of that. That's not the case. Our goal is compliance, and even with the cases where they have done something without a permit, our main thing was to get compliance, even if it was after the fact in that, and it's worked out well. So, having said that, there's a couple areas that I want to go over. First is really what kind of is the crux, I guess, of the ordinance, and that comes into when I need a permit, when I do not need a permit. By our code, ordinary maintenance and repair, which I gave the commission definition, and I'm not going to really necessarily bore the public with it, but if you're doing, for instance, if it's you have a color of the building that's white and you're repainting it white, that does not need a permit. If you have the wooden windows and you're replacing those windows and they're going to be the same style, the same color, and in essence be exactly what they were previously, you do not need a permit or approval from the commission for that. However, if you do any alteration, and the definition of an alteration, there's one key element in there. One of the key elements is if you need a building permit. If it requires a building permit, it's going to require to go to HPC prior to getting that permit. But it says that if you do any type of changing of your windows, if there are different types of windows, any facade changes, paint, any of that that's changing from what is already there, that is going to require HPC approval, and then that would be followed up in some cases with a permit. So that's kind of the difference between the what you do or can do without a permit and what you should not do prior to getting approval. And again, I just want to say that if you have anything that comes up and you're not sure, call. We'll be there, we'll answer. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't at least get back by the end of the day any phone calls that I receive, and the same goes with my building and code enforcement staff, so just give us a call. With that, I was going to move on to kind of probably, again, an important element, and I know it's even with today's agenda, regular meeting comes into play, is a contributing resource and a general resource. There is a difference in our code, and it's also differences on some of how those are handled. A contributing resource is pretty much anything that's in the National Historic Landmark District that's in there on a historic registry or in some form has some type of historical context from the type of workmanship, the materials, the design, those type of things. I'm working on, and Erin from the Historical Society I'm going to kind of lean on her as well to help get a list of all properties that are considered contributing resource versus general resource. So down the road, we don't really have the issues where we're trying to determine what is or isn't. In that, we also, through the Certified Local Governments Grant, have a historical survey that is being done that just finished up. In fact, the consultant called me today. I should have the final report in hand in a couple weeks. That was also reviewed and approved through the State Historical Preservation Office. That also outlines the condition of a lot of buildings, but also tells whether or not it should be considered a general resource or a contributing resource, not only to the National Historic Landmark District, but the General Historic District as a whole. So the contributing resource, there is more scrutiny, if you want to say, on those aspects, not only from whether it's painting, whether it's signage, whether any obviously changes in that, and then also in terms of if you go to the extent of wanting to have to actually tear it down. There's some very specific things that need to be taken care of. And again, most of those probably stand out to most. They're the early 1900s buildings. Most everything you see on Oklahoma, Harrison, and those areas, the early 1900 buildings, and even some of the homes that were built in the early 1900s. Those are considered contributing resources. A general resource is something that's usually a little more modern. We have a lot of buildings in the downtown that are still, you would say, fairly old, but they were built in the 40s, 50s, 60s, some even more recent than that. Those are considered a general resource. And the main thing with those is that they are supposed to have compatibility with the district. So if somebody were to build a new building, they do have to have compatibility in terms of the other buildings in the area from, again, the architecture, brick, the whole 9 yards. But again, there, if you want to say scrutiny, isn't quite as much because they are not part of or they're not one of the contributing resources. So even some things when it comes to window replacement and that, it isn't the scrutiny to where you have to have that, you know, wooden 1900s looking window. It was built in 1950, you're replacing a more modern window, that's, you know, that's acceptable. So that's kind of the difference between those. And then kind of the other element of the code and that I want to touch on is the minimum maintenance aspect. It is the responsibility of the property owners to maintain a certain level of minimum maintenance to ensure that these buildings stay, in this case, another 100, 200 years. In that. And I know that, again, when there's rotting windows or different stuff like that, if you have concern about replacing them, do you need to go to the commission or not go to the commission? If, you know, and that, again, give us a call because we want these buildings to stay around as long as they possibly can. And obviously that's the whole idea of the code, is the preservation of the buildings and other structures within the code. So far, there hasn't been any, I guess, strong, I know in the past there have been times where they've done a quote-unquote code enforcement sweep for minimum maintenance and that. I'm not sure, you know, down the road that may be something that could be looked at depending if the structures still start to go to a point where we feel that they don't have the minimum maintenance necessary. There's things such as an annual inspection program that could be implemented. There's different stuff like that. But obviously that's a thing that's up for, I guess, discussion in that. But we haven't really, it's usually on a, I guess, almost a reactive basis when, especially when code enforcement notices a window is busted or some windows hanging out. Obviously there's safety there as well as the integrity of the building. So. Finally, the other thing is in there is demolition. I'm not going to go in that to a great deal because it's something that honestly I hope we don't ever have to cover much. I know it's on tonight's agenda in that, but it's obviously not something that we really want to do. But as I said, the biggest thing is there is about 4 or 5 different sections in the code that talk about the processes, the timeframes, and a lot of other stuff that is dealing with approvals and criteria that needs to be met to demo. It's there for probably obvious reasons that we don't want somebody just to come in and say, oh, it's an old building, I don't want to deal with it, and I'm going to demo it. That's not what we want, and so a lot of that's put in there to make sure that there is proper discussion and that there's proper analysis done before there's ever any consideration of demolition. And that isn't just on a particular, let's say, brick building. That has to do with any of the homes within the district. That's for any structure in the district. And as I indicated earlier, if it's a general resource, there is criteria, but it's not as strict as if it's a contributing resource. So with that, the only other thing I wanted to mention was signage. Signage is always, I think, an issue. It's what I call a delicate balance of a business wanting and trying to have their identity, and then the code and, compliance with the code type of thing. And a lot of times they may not always come together. Probably the area that generally, I thought would probably have the most discussion maybe and considerations would be signage. In that, I'm not really sure. We'll see how the night goes on. But just a couple things. In 2004, they did amend the code to allow for the neon open signs. So the neon open signs are actually allowed. You can have one per business. And actually for buildings basically that are general resources or were built after the 1920s, the code actually allows neon. You can have it as accent, but again, it's all approved by or would have to be approved by the commission in that. And then in 2007, there was another amendment that would allow and kind of define the temporary promotional signage. But the biggest element of that is it was all to be either on the building or be there before permanent signage was put up. So even the open flags, I understand a little bit more about those in that, but technically by our code, it was never amended to allow those. A lot of the other flags you see flying are not allowed by code. Everything is, again, in the even a temporary nature, supposed to be on the building. You are allowed sandwich boards, and I think there's a lot of businesses that have it. And I will say that most of the sandwich boards out there are very nice, very appropriate for the district. So we really haven't had a lot of issues with signage boards being kind of out of character or not really being fitting for that. So with my brief overview and all of that, like I said, at this time, I'll leave it to the commission. If they have any specific questions, want to bring up any specific things in that, and then again, let the public speak on it and that. And just to add, if the commission does desire to have maybe some possible code amendments in that to look at coming out of the workshop, those would be brought back at a later meeting. The commission would be a recommendation body on that because it would be amending the ordinance. So the commission would make a recommendation on an ordinance change, and it would go to the city council for them to make a final decision on that particular ordinance. But if there are some, again, ordinance changes that the commission would like to see, the first step would be I go back and do a draft of the ordinances or the issues, and then at a meeting bring it to you guys for another review and recommendation. So with that, I'll be quiet and leave it to the commission.
Okay. Any comments, commissioners? Anyone want to make amendments to the ordinance?
Well, I think that if our current ordinances don't allow for our open flags, we definitely need to, in my opinion, those should be allowed. We should be able to have open flags. Every building has a flag hole in the sidewalk in front of it. So I think that that would be something we would want to either not enforce or amend.
I would prefer the amend route rather than look the other way.
I don't know the other commissioners' feelings, but my opinion on the flags, I I've never had a problem with the red, white, and blue open flags in downtown Guthrie, but the feather flags, the great big tall feather flags, to me, they don't look, I don't know, they just don't, I've never seen them in any other historic downtown district. They don't, they call way too much attention to themselves and take away way too much from our.
Attention to themselves is kind of the point.
Pardon me?
Attention is kind of the point of the flag.
Yeah,
But I understand what you're
and it's
saying.
sort of
I understand what
nice
you're
to drive
saying.
through town and not see loans and marijuana, blowing in the wind. I just don't. Guthrie and those flags just, that's,
Yeah, they look like a
everybody has
used. They look like a used
opinion,
car.
but I can't imagine driving through Georgetown or Eureka Springs or Gainesville or just any historic little town and seeing those banana flags. So, and they're lime green and yellow and fuchsia and purple, and so that's just my opinion.
I totally concur.
Well, I think you guys are talking about two different things, because James was talking about just a flag that says open. Is that correct?
Yeah.
They're the same.
But
I mean, the feather flag, no matter what the feather flag says, if we don't allow feather flags, I would say that we only allow the
Open.
4x5 open,
Yeah,
red, white,
I
and
mean,
blue.
I don't have any problem with the red, white, and blue, and I'd like to be specific too, so it's not like fuchsia and yellow and magenta.
Right, and just from a,
They look sort of period, they're a traditional flag, they're red, white, and blue. When they're all on the streets downtown, they look a little festive.
Yeah,
So,
I
I mean, if you're gonna, and I don't know that they're historically, correct, but they're certainly easier to take. And they don't say loans and vape. So that's my opinion.
I don't know whether it would necessarily apply just to the flags, but I don't know. I would like to read aloud just a small paragraph here from the National Park Service when it talks about signs in historic areas. It says, yet many efforts to control signage leads to bland sameness. For this reason, the National Park Service discourages the adoption of local guidelines that are too restrictive and that effectively dictate uniform signs within commercial districts. Instead, it encourages communities to promote diversity in signs, their sizes, types, colors, lighting, lettering, and other qualities. It also encourages business owners to choose signs that reflect their own tastes, values, and personalities. At the same time, tenant sign practices can be stricter than sign ordinances, but the National Park Service therefore encourages businesses to fit their sign programs to their buildings.
What is that from, James?
This is from the National Park Services for Historic Preservation,
I have a question.
the Preservation of Historic
Are-
Signs Guidelines.
Are the holes out there where they're putting their flag, is that city property?
yes.
And I think that,
Yeah, but the code actually gives an exception to have, or even if it doesn't, we can add an exception in there to say that even though it's in the right, because even the signage board is technically in the right-of-way, because they're on the sidewalk in that, but they're to be to where they don't impede pedestrian traffic. But having that type of signage in a right-of-way, even on quote-unquote city property, is
Doesn't matter.
fairly typical. So it's not something that would be unheard of.
was that where the parking meters were? Those holes?
No.
That I don't know.
And I think in your mail out, you talked about font not really being a part of,
Yes, I did.
yeah, and I think that's sort of what James is getting to, not being restrictive on font or some creativity or, but I do think that my opinion again, you've got to, in my opinion, you've got to restrict some size of the signs in the windows, or you're going to have, or you could literally have nothing but a sign in the window.
Sure, and it does
So
say they
it's gotta
should fit
be-
the building. I'm not saying you
Yeah.
can't have restrictions,
And
but
I like
it's,
the 30%, but like maybe being a little more liberal with font and letting the business owner be a little more creative, since that's not in there. But I see what you're getting at.
I mean, for example, when Hoboken came originally to get their sign, the Historic Preservation didn't want to approve it, and I think it's a great sign.
Right.
you know? So I think that we just have to be mindful of, these are people's businesses, this is their livelihood.
Right.
And from, if I can add, from staff's perspective, I don't disagree. You know, it's one of those things where honestly, from a staff perspective, I guess my biggest concern, and if there's a battle I want to go, I guess, to, it's more on the minimum maintenance, preservation of the buildings, not so much the signage and the fonts and the colors and that. Because again, you know, we want these buildings to stand the test of time well beyond the 100 years that they are. And I guess if you're, I hate to say hammer, but if you're going to kind of be always at a business, I think it's better in that realm. And then in that regard, you give a little bit more leniency or that when it comes to signage. Because like I said, you know, when I first started, in any preservation district, I don't care where you're at, there's always the delicate balance of a business, property rights, and them being able to function, make money, and be productive, and then have, you know, your code and restrictive or what would be looked at as very restrictive regulations that a lot of business may not be, you know, all that happy about. So there's a delicate balance. There's never a good solution. I just think with signage and some of that, even from a staff perspective, it's a battle that I hate being heavy-handed on. I think we can have an ordinance to where there's going to be signage that keeps the character in that, but yet allows a business to have their own identity and again, you know, flourish. Because I would love to see nothing more than every building in the downtown full and businesses flourishing. You know, that's what we want. So again, you know, always, I guess we got to keep that in mind when we're doing a lot of the code stuff. There are, you know, those elements at play.
Can we, and I don't think anyone that's ever come in has objected to the 30% rule. I mean, they may have tried to go over that.
Sure.
thought.
Yeah, no, and I don't see that as a problem. I mean, I'm not opposed to the 30% rule. I just think historically, what this board has done has been controlling of signage and colors because, let's just be real, unfortunately, businesses don't last that long in a historic district. So if you don't like a sign, there's a good chance in 6 months it won't be there anyway. And that's sad to say. That's really sad to say. But I think that what I would rather us be more proactive about is ensuring that these buildings are well taken care of. When we have a broken window, that a broken window is addressed, that the buildings are structurally being maintained. And it's unfortunate that we have a lot of buildings right now that aren't, that really do need some minimum guidelines or minimum things done about them.
I would like to say that I think everyone in this room is very much invested in the idea of a flourishing business district. I mean, I'm not serving on this commission because I want to kill some business's chance at, you know, at succeeding here. I want them to succeed here. However, as a historical preservation commission, our job is to try to balance these two. As far as signs go, like you said, businesses come and go, and signs change. However, you know, if you've got these flutter signs that are in front of every business up and down Oklahoma, somebody who drives in from Michigan off the interstate, who maybe read about the town in a magazine, looks and goes, well, I don't know what's so special about that town. You know, I see those signs all the time. Mm-hmm. I'm not against individuality, but I am against so much commercialization that we lose what's special about this district.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well said.
Can we, well, I think that our signage ordinances are flexible sort of now. I mean, it's always been sort of a judgment call. I don't, besides the restriction of size, the font is not mentioned anywhere in our guidelines.
Yeah, because really all it talks about is an appropriate size of lettering in that, and basically, again, to make sure you don't have lettering that just, you know, overtakes a facade or even a signage area. But that's why I said it really doesn't get into specifics about font and what type of font and even, you know, color palettes and all of that. It's more about I guess, the design or the basic design of the sign itself more than the lettering and that comes with it.
So do I understand we're not discussing font anymore? Because I know like when the high end came, it was a discussion about what font, and
was.
some commissioners didn't like it.
But in our most recent mail out from Dan, it talked about that font doesn't appear anywhere.
Yeah, and again, that was just one of the things that I added. And the same thing, I don't want to say, that outside the open flags, I don't agree with the other type of flags either. I think it adds to clutter. And honestly, even outside the historic district, I'm not a big fan of that. However, if the community wants it, so be it. I'm not here to say any different, so to speak, but it usually adds to sign clutter in that, and especially down in a historic area, I don't know if that's appropriate. The open signs, I think, are appropriate, no issue. Again, I just brought it up because it technically isn't by code, and I'd like to get in the code, so then we don't have any issues.
Is there any reference to the open sign flashing?
There is reference in there that you can't have any type of signs that are lit, flashing, or otherwise.
that's what
Yeah,
I thought.
in general, there's a general reference to it,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
no flashing.
Right.
Can we
Well, I would think
ask
we could propose that we allow the red, white, and blue open signs, 3.5. I mean, put the size on there. If they're 3, I think they're 3 by 5. The 3 foot by 5 feet,
And-
red, white, and blue open signs would be allowed to put in those.
Yeah, if we could get a.
Yeah, and just like the chairman had indicated, we would put it to, or the code would come back to say that, the size, and then it would be in the red, white, and blue type thing. It'd probably be a similar element or code amendment that they did for the open neon signs, in that you would have one per business, and it would be a red, white, and blue type flag, in that it would be similar to what's out there. So that way, we don't start to get other types of flags or other colors of flags. It would all be consistent.
Can we ask some of the people who are here what they think about the
Absolutely.
Please, that's what
Is there anybody here that would?
Cherie's here.
About the feather flags? Would you come up and tell us your opinion? Because the whole point of this is to get feedback from everybody.
Yeah, I'm Stacy, if y'all know who it is. I actually have 2 businesses downtown, and we usually do the red, white, and the blue flag, no problem with that. But I do have a dispensary as well, and we did the green sign, which I personally do not like them either, so I don't have a problem taking that down. My partner liked it, so. But my question is, where we're located, we do not have one of the holes in the ground. So I know we can't, like, to put the open flag, so we can't drill into the building, I wouldn't think, to actually affix an open flag to that. So we've been just putting it on the fence that's right there at the Victor Building. I just don't know where we're supposed to put it. So we just want to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. So I just don't know where to put this flag, since there is no hole in the ground there for us.
Okay.
And right now, we don't have any guidelines for that.
Well, 'cause like I said, we just zip tied it to, like, the Victor Building has that wrought iron fence, and so we just put it right there. But
For
when we
now,
got the
that's-
letter, I was one of the people that called
Yes.
and was like, well, wait a minute, we all have open flags, what do we do, So I just didn't know where we're supposed to actually put it.
Well, for now, that's perfect.
I agree, though, with the other flags. I don't really care for all the tall, standing, wispy flags either. I definitely like the red, white, and blue. I think it looks a little more structured. It does look a little more kind of patriotic when you drive through town, and I agree with that. So, thank you, guys.
Anybody else?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Mathis, and I have a business downtown. If you look at Automobile Alley, for instance, they are required to have a neon sign. Now, font is not an issue, and it has to go in front of a board. What they're really trying to promote is a very unified feel. I think what we're lacking here at Guthrie is we don't have a feel. So I would propose to the board or the panel to really come up with in advance, before you start changing ordinances and reviewing signs in the future, what is it that you really want our signs to look like as they go through? Maybe even contact a design expert that can bring that vision to life, instead of just saying, we don't like this, we don't like that. Let's have a unified vision of what we want people to see as they run through. It can't just be in my opinion, red, white, and blue. And if that is the message that you want visitors to see, then we need to, I guess, in that case, move that forward and say, this is the look that we want to go. But to me, it's just a hodgepodge of signs. We need a branding. Guthrie, we're selling Guthrie. We need a brand, and that's just my opinion. So my advice to you is to maybe find out what that brand would look like.
When the HP committee was first created, the idea behind it was Victorian city. And so Guthrie was the Victorian city, the Queen City on the prairie. So that's where that originated. And so that's where a lot of these guidelines came from, is to be Victorian-esque.
But as I look around and see that that's not our vision, that's not what I'm seeing. We see Mexican restaurants with wood signs that look more like farmhouse signs, you know? So if you're going to require certain open house signs, then post these, like, not open house signs, I'm sorry, but open signs, then post, this is the material, this is the look, this is what we want. This is the type of sign that we require on our buildings. And just that we can, I mean, if you drive down certain districts downtown on 16th, they all have a feel, and that's not by mistake. I mean, they have some very smart people there that are looking at their overall branding message, right? Thanks.
I agree with everything she said in spirit. I think the problem is I don't disagree with you at all. The problem is that just kind of goes against everything what everybody was just saying. Like no, again, I'm with you. I want that too, but everyone's like, well, everyone needs to be individual. Everyone needs to be able to do their own signage. Well, if they're doing that, we're not going to have a cohesive look.
Well, I kind of disagree because in Automobile Alley, for instance, I know I keep bringing it up, and I can name others. There is a very individualistic feel. There's just a certain material that's required that makes it cohesive throughout.
I got you.
You understand?
I understand.
Okay.
I got you.
Do you have any suggestions of what it would look like?
I could come up with some suggestions.
Well,
I haven't really.
I do know that, like, for example, when you go to these well-grounded historic communities, you won't see any red, white, and blue open signs in the windows. They will be small, black and white, open, look very period. And of course, Automobile Alley looks like, it reminds me of the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, like a big old car.
Right.
Sort of cool. And of course, Guthrie certainly can't do that.
No, but there's other, like even Eureka Springs has, when you walk down it has a very cohesive feel, even though the signage is different. And so I'm just proposing that maybe everyone walk down, kind of get an idea of what they envision Guthrie really to look like, instead of, just hodgepodging it as an individual basis by, going from there. But as far as restricting, after you put those guidelines in and this is what we want to look like, this is the material, I mean, you guys have final say. I wouldn't try to be too restrictive and, suppress creativity, because that's what we're really trying to draw here. Yeah, thank you.
And if you've been to our meetings, I think we sort of do that.
I think we try.
We try.
To suppress creativity?
I think, yes.
What did he say?
Yes.
I didn't wear my
To suppress
It's my
creativity, that's
way.
what you try to do?
Yeah.
No, I think like
Yeah.
a marketing
Now
plan,
that you
kind
mention
of
it.
cohesive look. I think that would actually probably need to start with the city council and like the other city organizations, for them to give us more guidance on what they would like to see, because I think that would be a little bit overstepping our.
Yeah, I mean, there's some leeway, I guess, there for the commission in the regard specific to the historic district and some of the things, but you're probably right. I mean, if it's an overall kind of city branding type of thing, then, like you said, that's for, the bigger realm to.
But I think we would look to this commission for suggestions. I mean, I think that's why we're here. That's why this group is
Right.
here, is to really try to help us do that feel. I don't think that group of 7.
Originally, it was designed to be Victorian, and over the decades, it's expanded and morphed and gone either which direction, and so absolutely, it's easy to kind of lose your way from that.
Well, and I just think that innovation, I mean, there's all types of new products, it's easier to get things printed. I mean, there's just been a lot of things move to be able to allow us to do this. I mean, one of the things that I hate that we've lost is the lighting on the buildings. I mean, that was a really cool thing when you could drive through downtown Guthrie and all the buildings were lit up. Well, how many of them have lights that don't work now? I mean, the fact that the Victor building isn't lit up is just, it's terrible, I think. I think that that's really a cool thing. A lot of really liked photos on the that you find on the internet are those pictures, you know? And so I think that's something that we need to look at. I personally think we should have an ordinance that every building has to be lit. Absolutely. Come on back up here.
So far, it seems like oh, go ahead, Stacy.
I think where I come from on this is I don't own my building where my restaurant is, and I'm working with building owners that don't really care about the building. I've been dealing with that for years. The cost to have those lights put on that building, because believe me, I would love to have my building lit up. It looks amazing. I had Jim Case come out and just run me a string of lights across the top last year. It cost me $1,500 for one strand of lights across the front of the whole building. So cost is a huge thing for me. Like, I don't have $6 grand to fork in some lights. Like, believe me, I would love to. If I had it, I would do it. I would love it. But realistically, I don't have that. So that's when you start talking about ordinances for that as a business owner and not a building owner. And I know that's something that they need to maybe take care of. But I mean, that's where I come from on that. I'm like, I don't have the money to do that. That's not something that's even feasible for me.
Well, and to be fair, I mean, Jason Seaton did my entire building for less than that. So, I mean, I think sometimes it's maybe getting some quotes. Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's both buildings then. It's not just one of
Sure.
them. And I have 111 and 113. So it's a pretty substantial amount of space.
Okay, if we don't want to be here till 9 o'clock
Right.
tonight.
Okay.
I do think Cherie
What I'm
did.
thinking is, I mean, what I've heard, the one thing that I've heard, though, is the consensus on the feather flags and the open flags. And we can continue to discuss tweaking signage or relaxing or branding or as we go along. Or have another workshop just for signage. But as far as the flags go, would anyone be interested in making a motion to make an amendment to only allow the square red, white, and blue open flags?
Yeah, I mean, or even at this point, honestly, I don't know if we need a motion in a second, but just some general direction. Because like I said, that would be brought back at a later date anyway.
Okay.
And so then obviously at that time was when we get the formal recommendation
Okay.
from the commission
Sounds
to move
good.
on to the city
I
council.
would like to see it happen.
Yes, me too.
Okay.
Would like to see it happen.
For anything else about minimum maintenance or contributing resources, does anybody else here want to talk about any of that stuff?
I think minimum maintenance is a great thing.
Okay,
That's just me.
I do too. Okay,
I've already spoke my opinion too.
okay.
But
Right.
that's the thing I was going to say, because, you know, again, if there's anybody that wants to speak about anything, please step up. Yeah.
More. I guess the one question that you haven't hit yet, from the letter that we received, you haven't got the roofing, and I was kind of wondering on that, because I don't know if you're specific on that, if you're talking about the residential houses or the buildings, because I realized I put a new roof on mine a year ago, and I went with the TPC covering instead of the tar gravel. And I didn't know, you know, I just needed a roof. I'm putting a roof on, I'm trying to put the best roof I can.
Yeah, and I mean, again, it does apply to any structure within the district. And I know with some of the homes, there probably has been stuff done. And I'm not saying that it wasn't even without a permit. There might have been the proper permits obtained from the building end of things. But I can't say with certainty, because I haven't been here long enough to say that it did go to the HPC. But having said that, like I said, if you are doing any change, call, because in a lot of cases, it can fall under ordinary minimum maintenance in that, even if it's a slight upgrade on the roofing in that, you know, with some compatibility and all of that, we, you know, can work with it. In some cases, it may require to go to the or the Historic Preservation Commission for approval prior to going through that step. And so that's why, you know, again, one of my hopes with that letter was a line of communication, you know, just call in that, and we'll discuss it and get things figured out and make sure that you're going down the right track.
Okay. I was just curious.
Yeah, and what you
My
have,
building,
yeah.
actually, what you're outlining, mine
Yeah.
is a general purpose.
And what's your address so we can send?
I'm in Redstone, 206, and in the process of remodeling that building and bringing in a planner because I realize that my ideas are terrible. But I love what Sarah said about bringing somebody in to really to do this, and that's what I've done. And so I have big plans for the Redstone, inside and out. But looking at the color palette that's available right now was kind of small. So I was kind of hoping that maybe, like Benjamin Moore paints, I think they've got like 80 plus colors, all historical colors. And so the palette that I was looking at was kind
Who did you say?
of Benjamin Moore.
Benjamin Moore?
Yeah. And that's not a plug for them. I mean, it doesn't matter to me, but.
No, the way it's written in here is, and it says, you know, the Ace Hardware, you know, historic color palette. But I think we've been open to other historic color palettes so that we're not just supporting, because we like
Yeah.
to support Ace Hardware, but we know that there's a lot of other things out there, so.
Well, especially before like I go and do a complete remodel.
Yeah.
And on the outside, the colors and everything, I'm like, it would be nice to have more than that color palette.
Yeah, and, oh, sorry, I was just going to add that I do have saved on my computer a historic palette from Benjamin Moore, Sherwin-Williams, and Ace Hardware.
Okay.
So, and I think Commissioner Brown hit it perfectly, that we're probably most concerned, or probably should be most concerned, that it has some type of historical context in that, in the color, not so much that we have a specific palette and that's it in that, because that does limit the creativity. So as long as it can be compatible, or say it has some historic context, that's the main thing.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else with some thoughts? If I don't have anything else from any of the commissioners, go ahead.
For contributing resource definitions, the museum has the entire research and documentation for the historic district, all of the research that was done and the outlines of what was going on. So if anybody ever has any question about whether it's a contributing resource or not, you can come to the museum and I'll look it up for you. And then we're cleaning stuff, and I found an old, it's published in 2007, the Economic Impact of Historic Preservation. I have this here. If anybody wants to look at that, it's something like $885 million in 2007. So what we're doing here matters quite a bit. So I think if anybody wants to kind of review that, again, it's an old study, but kind of reinforces that this is valuable stuff, even though it can be tedious.
Any more comments? All right, then we are adjourning our workshop and continuing with the regular meeting. Do I need to call the order again?
No, I think we're good on that one.
Okay,
We'll
good.
go with the last one. Go to public comments if there's still any.
Public comments, and if you want to wait to comment until we get to your item, that's fine as well. Okay. Item 3 is approval of previous minutes from the regular meeting on August 5th, 2019.
Go ahead.
We're trying to beat each other to it. I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Third,
Or James can. But James is
Okay,
second.
put James, all right, second.
So moved.
All right, got a motion and a second. James Hensley,
yes.
Aaron Brown,
Yes.
Patrick Kerr,
Yes.
Valerie Duncan,
Yes.
Adam Ropp,
Yes.
Lynn Bilodeau,
Yes.
Joe Chappell.
Yes. All right. All right. Item number 4 is HPC application 19-018, discussion and potential action on a request for a certificate of appropriateness for the demolition of an existing home and discussion and potential action on a request for a certificate of appropriateness for the construction of a new home for the property located at 314 South 2nd Street. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I just want to comment that I'm looking for basically 2 actions on this. The first one would be the demolition. I'm going to go over my staff report and the analysis and that, but then have that discussion and then a decision on that. If there is a decision on to move forward with the demolition, then we can move to the second aspect, which would be looking at a approval for the new construction or for new structure. But I'd also like to add that even if you would approve the demo, if you don't feel you have sufficient information on the second part to approve a home or that we can always leave at a later date or have them come back, have the applicant come back with more information or whatever, but they are 2 separate items. You can approve the first without the second. It's just the second obviously isn't going to be approved if the first is not. So having said that, at the last meeting, this was tabled because there was a time frame in the code, 60-day time frame from date of application to when it could be heard, that hadn't been met, so there was no discussion. We had tabled it. Since that time, the time frame to meet the 60-day period has passed. It would have been as of August 19th that the 60-day period. There were discussions with different, not only the commission, but other members of the community in that, and we're still at a point where the applicant is requesting to have the structure demolished. Section 16 talks about the ability to acquire a certificate of economic hardship. In this case, that does not apply. The code specifically says that if the structure is left to deteriorate in that, and basically somebody doesn't do proper maintenance, that's not justification to proceed with a certificate of economic hardship. Which brings us to Section 17. Section 17 specifically says that unusual and compelling circumstances in demolition of a landmark resource, a resource on a landmark or a site, or landmark site or contributing resource within a historic district, that the commission still can make an approval for a demolition under Section 17 if it meets, there's criteria A through G, and then there's actually even some sub-criteria under section or Part A. I'm going to probably bore you with some of this, but it's important information that needs to be out there. What I'm going to relay is staff's analysis. If you disagree with that or you don't think that we have analyzed it properly, that's obviously your prerogative as the commission in that. So having said that, the first is A, which is the significance of the resource as defined in Sections 7 and 8 of the code. Section 7 details 5 criteria that basically is utilized to designate a landmark in that. And the section, the second portion of that basically talks about which is Section 8, talks more about the district as a whole, or if you're looking to put properties within a district. So actually, Section 8 really doesn't apply to this matter because we're talking about a specific structure on a specific property. But Section 7 does apply. So A says, does it exemplify or reflect elements of the cultural, social, economic, engineering, political, or other heritage of the city of Guthrie? Staff does not believe that staff has found that really the only importance or redeeming factor of the home was the time period in which it was built. It does not have any type of extra, architectural qualities or even any known historical significance beyond the time period in which it was built. B says it has any special aesthetic, artistic interests or values. Again, the home itself does not have any architectural qualities or known historical significance. C, is it identified with any historic persons or important events in the history of the city of Guthrie, the state of Oklahoma, Indian Territory, and Oklahoma Territory, or the nation in general? Staff has not found that there is any known historic persons that have lived in the house and that there were no important events or anything that would trace it to the history from the city, the state, or an Indian or Oklahoma Territory. D, does it embody distinguished architectural characters which are valuable for a study of any period, style, or method of construction, or if it is a valuable example of a use of native or indigenous materials or craftsmanship? As I stated, the home does not have any architectural qualities, and even given the time frame, the house, or given the only quality it has is the time frame in which it was built. Again, even the craftsmanship itself is not unique. There are actually other properties within the area that have more unique craftsmanship or architecture. And finally, is it a representative of a notable work of a master builder, designer, or architect? Again, we could not find any information that says that there's a particular master builder, designer, or architect of significant historical significance that had built that particular home. So from staff's perspective, A, the analysis in order to, I guess, meet that criteria would be met. Move on to B. It says the importance of the resource to the integrity of a historic district, an area, or cluster. Again, staff really found that the only redeeming factor it has is the time period in which it was built. The home doesn't have any type of real architectural qualities or known historical significance. As I just indicated, within the area, there are actually other homes that have more historical, I guess you call value. In fact, the porch supports are metal. They're more modern. They've been changed over time. And the house has vinyl siding, which is of a more modern. So even some of the updates that have been done, approved or not, have a more modern context to them. Whereas most all the other homes in the area, even the porch supports are still stone or wood. They're relative of that area. This house doesn't have that. C, the difficulty or impossibility of reproducing such a resource because of its design, texture, material, detail, or uniqueness. Staff does not feel that reproducing a similar home or honestly in better probably architectural quality or a home that would be compatible with the district would be hard to do. It's been done before in that, so I don't think this would be something that we would lose and not have anything that could be reproduced. D, whether the resource is one of the last remaining examples of its kind in the neighborhood, the county, or the region. Again, we cannot find any evidence that it has anything special that would put it out there as a last remaining kind or of its kind. There are plenty of the basic cottage homes like that, not only in the historic district, but throughout our entire community. The other E is whether there are definite plans for reuse of the property if the proposed demolition is carried out, and what effect such plans will have on the character of surrounding area, as well as the economic impact of the new development. As I indicated to start off with, the applicant does have a desire to build another home. That will be the second part of the discussion if the demo is approved. And by code, he is required to have a home that is going to be compatible not only with what has been there, but for the district itself in that from, you know, the size, the look, the whole thing. So he can't just put up a basic modern home and call it good. It's going to have context of the area as well as the code requirements in that. And then F is whether reasonable measures can be taken to save the resource from further deterioration, collapse, arson, vandalism, or neglect. The staff feels that the home is past reasonable salvation. The city has found the structure to be unsafe and we would consider it dilapidated given what we had. It has been neglected from lack of maintenance and upkeep from the previous owners in that. And actually, Mike will go into that a little bit more, which leads into G. with the PowerPoint, because he did do a site inspection and he went through, and again, we'll have a PowerPoint to go over some of the code issues and that relative to it. But the last one is whether the resource has become so damaged or dilapidated that it is declared unsafe or dangerous by the city as provided in section 22 of this ordinance. So now that I've talked long enough, I'll let Mike do his PowerPoint on that. The last thing I'd just like to mention in that is the follow-up, which is section 18. Basically, section 18 says that the commission has to use sound judgment, basically taking into account everything that I have stated. And as I indicated again, if you feel that my analysis or staff's analysis wasn't appropriate, correct, or what, that's your prerogative. But any decision should be made on the sound judgment and trying to meet the criteria of, in particular, section 17 of what I just went through. So with that, I'll leave it with Mike, and then if the commission has any questions of staff, we can be available. And you guys were provided a copy of the PowerPoint in your packet.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to start with the definition of what the existing building code has for dangerous. The building has partially collapsed, moved off its foundation, or lacks necessary support off the ground. This is the house we're talking about. If we work off the existing building code, this would be a minimum of alteration 3, which would apply to the work area exceeds 50% of the building. Yeah, give me just a second. I'll get used to it in a second. Okay. The work area exceeds 50% of the building area under limited circumstances, the alterations are allowed to meet IEBC as long as there has been no substantial structural damage or there will be no limited structural alterations. So we're going to talk about the footing and foundation. The main structure has a rubble stone or a sandstone foundation, which would be the front half up there. You can kind of see it in the bottom of the picture, bottom left. The back half has a wood foundation or what is known as a mud sill, which would be the far left side of the house and possibly the kitchen too. It's hard to tell without getting underneath it. There's not much crawl space, but if you look right here underneath the door and over on the right where there's a hole in the floor, the walls were built directly on top of the dirt. There's no kind of foundation under it. The rubble stone foundation is starting to crumble. It's had a lot of moisture built up in it due to the roof being gone, and the mortar is starting to fall apart around the sandstone. So then we're going to talk about the floor because that's the next step up. So best case scenario, Douglas fir number 2x6 will span 24 inches on center, will span 8'8". If it is labeled as a number 1, there is no label on these floor joists, so it's hard to know exactly what kind of wood they are or what they're graded at. Most of the joists aren't bearing on anything because the wall construction has seen serious deterioration, and the lateral restraints are gone. So, first floor we walked into actually has a crown in the middle of it. So the picture on the left shows the level balanced in the middle. There's approximately a 3/4 inch gap under the left side and about a 1/2 inch gap under the right side. As you can tell, when we put the level to level right behind the hole, it's 3 or 4 inches out of level. So that's in the first room. Second room also slopes from north to south, about a 1/4 bubble, so it's about 2 or 3 inches and 4 feet. The kitchen actually is fairly level east to west, but when we turned it north to south, unfortunately the pictures were too blurred to get a real good, it slopes east to west from the back of the building to the middle of the building. So there's the rest of the floor. A lot of the floor joists are completely uncovered. The clawfoot bathtubs falling completely through the floor joists. And as you can tell, some of them are missing or scabbed in. So the next would be the wall construction. The 2x4s didn't appear to be too bad in some of the rooms. Back up. But anywhere there was a window, a lot of it has been moisture and rotted through. There is a large structural crack in the kitchen. It's hard to tell exactly why without the plaster being taken off of it. Even rot all the way up door frames. It could be termite damage. It could be just be dry rot. The paneling is warped in every room that still has paneling on it. So either moisture has been behind it or walls are starting to collapse behind them. It's hard to tell. And then the roof construction, asphalt construction, seen the majority of its life. There's several holes completely through the roof. Roof joists are starting to sag. Then some other miscellaneous requirements. If it was going to be a habitable structure, it'd have to meet. It'd have to have heat. It'd have to have water, bathtub, kitchen, secondary egress. Most of the windows have been boarded up. Smoke alarms for all the sleeping rooms. The picture on the top right, when we step there, even the hardwood floor is starting to deflect. Half inch, 3/4 of an inch when you step right there. All the windows are starting to fall out of the hole. So there you go.
I'm sorry, if I could, one last thing, I was just going to add that, I was just going to add our, if you want to say recommendation. So based on this, based on our analysis of the code criteria as well as the site visit in that, staff would recommend that the commission approve the certificate of appropriateness for demolition, and then also approve a certificate of appropriateness for a conceptual design of an era-specific home. The home should be a cottage-style home with consideration of amenities and size to ensure compatibility with the homes in the area. In addition, staff would recommend the commission approve with the following conditions: that a demolition permit be obtained within 30 days of approval and the house be demolished within 60 days of approval. If a building permit for a new structure is not obtained within 60 days approval, then the property must meet the criteria set forth within Section 21 of the City of Guthrie Historic Preservation Ordinance, which basically says that it has to be completely cleaned up, sodded if necessary for drainage and that, basically so the lot doesn't become a nuisance or an eyesore. So now I give it back to the commission.
All right.
So this, honestly, in 6 years that I've been on the committee, this is the very first time that we've even had the discussion of potentially tearing down and demoing a contributing resource. So I know we were all kind of scrambling and didn't remember what we needed to do. And so I feel very much better about making a decision because we've gone through all the hoops. So thank you. I know it's been tedious, but thank you. Appreciate it.
One thing to let everybody know, Elijah and I have done 5 projects together in the last year and a half, 4 or 5.
Yeah.
And he has never asked for a demo permit. One of the ones that I thought should have, he brought back to life. 2-story over on the northwest side, northeast side, sorry, that had been hit by lightning, burned majority of the roof off of it. He put it back together. He's not looking to demo this because he wants to. So.
Very cool. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right.
Any questions for the
Do I-
applicant?
Do I read this correct first, though, that if we don't permit him to demolish it and build a home, that the city's going to?
More than likely, to be honest with you, given our analysis and that, it probably would end up on our dilapidated homes list if it doesn't approve for demolition, because we've had ones probably less gone, I guess, on our list than this particular one, so it would likely end up there.
I move that we approve the demolition.
We're going to take discussion from, because we have public.
We got-
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna say,
we
we
do.
should
There may
have
be
public
public
discussion.
Yeah.
Discussion.
Yeah.
Discussion.
I still move that we remove the,
Okay, do you, Elijah, do you have anything to add to what, before we ask for public?
I don't really have anything. I think I've said enough in the past few meetings. The very first meeting, I kind of, stated my case and stated my reasons for the demo and gave you guys a lot of ideas for the new project. So I think I've, pretty much done what I can do, work with Mike, and I really appreciate him doing his part to, do the analysis and everything. So, yeah,
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is there potentially anything in that house worth salvaging? Doors, the clawfoot tub? Anything?
Yeah, I
Sure
mean,
you
I
could
think like
anything that?
we've looked at the front door, like it's, possibly salvageable. So I mean, I think that would be like something that's kind of unique to the house that we could probably salvage. I mean, as far as like, there may be a couple 2x4s and stuff in the walls, but I mean, we could build those into the new wall, but you won't see those, or
Right,
that's just
right.
part of the structure of the house. So it's not really any aesthetically anything that you would see. So I think like the front door is definitely a possibility that we could incorporate into the new build.
I was going to say, the metal supports and vinyl siding.
Where's the salvageable? Okay. Okay.
So, yeah, well, I mean, we'll definitely, go in there and take the door off and do, save that. I think that'd be a cool thing to incorporate into the new house, so.
All right, cool.
You're gonna have to put a new foundation.
Do what?
You're gonna have to put a new foundation.
Yes, because like Mike said, I think the front half of the house has the sandstone, but the back half is on a mud seal, and I actually had a foundation guy come out, and he said, yes, it is a mud seal. So basically, that means that there's no type of foundation. So, we'll be putting in a new foundation for the new house.
The
So,
whole, all of it.
yeah, that's the plan. Just because it doesn't really make sense to build half a house on an old foundation, half a house on the new foundation, because then you may be kind of compromised.
Right.
You wouldn't want half of your house to settle and then the other half not settle. It just causes a lot of issues. So.
And how many square foot is the house that's existing?
I think the existing house is probably 900 maybe.
I was going to say,
And what
Yeah.
square footage are you proposing exclusive of garage space?
So I'd like to do something around 11 to 1,200 square feet.
Okay.
So definitely not over 13. I mean, it's going to be compatible with, I think probably most of the houses on that street are, between 9 and 1,400 square feet would be my guess. So definitely not going to be doing anything, 2,000 square feet or anything like that. Like it wouldn't fit. Plus it wouldn't look good. So. Any other questions?
Any other questions? No. Okay. Any other comments?
It's me again, sorry. I'm Sarah Mathis. I'm with the Logan County Historical Society, and we're kind of, just here to present a letter that was written by, and she's going to kill me, but it was Nell Thalasinos, I think. She's the director of the Logan County Historical Society, and she asked me to come and present this letter that we unanimously agreed to together, and we voted to present it to the board. Now, it's not really in regards to any particular home. It's about setting a precedence, because once we start to tear down one house, it becomes easier to tear down more. I believe the comments from the staff was that it's not particularly important, or it never was, nobody important lived there. Well, as a community, we tell a story. There's a lot of homes, as he mentioned, that are just like this home. And together they tell a story, maybe not singularly, but together they do. And so when we start to change the cityscape, we hold a national historical signifier for Guthrie. And so once we start to change the cityscape and change the age of our homes, we can lose that, which is actually what brings a lot of visitors here to us. So I just want to read this letter. I don't want to pick sides. I don't want to, because I'm not really here for that. I'm just here to present this letter, okay? The Logan County Historical Society has been made aware of the debates over the tear down and new building of existing residential structures versus renovating and revitalization. In line with Logan County Historical Society's mission of preservation and restoration, we would like it to be known that the LCHS Board are in full support of saving the structure any structure that is feasibly salvageable. Please read the article, which I've attached here, and I'll give it to you. And it's called "When a House is Demolished, More Than a Home is Lost" by Kevin D. Murphy, Chair of Humanities and Professor of the History of Art at Vanderbilt University, written in 2013 on the heels of more than 500 houses having been torn down, historical houses being torn down in Nashville, Tennessee. Items to consider beyond aesthetics, and I know that you mentioned them, is the effects on the historical designated areas, economically monolithical neighborhoods, and long-term residents scatter. Basically, what this is saying is that if we start to tear down these small structures that could be renovated, we are going to start losing not only like I said, the story of Guthrie, but we're going to start losing some residents. We're going to start increasing our prices per square foot, and we're going to start creating monolithic neighborhoods. And I'll read more on that in just a moment. There's also cultural implications. A lot of these families that lived in these homes are going to be pushed out into more or less costly homes. So as we are tearing them down and we're creating new construction, we're going to $115, $120 a square foot. And some of our less fortunate residents can't afford that. And so then we're basically creating a wash where we become Edmond, Yukon, that sort of thing. And it's not just our homes that we're protecting, it's our culture here in Guthrie that we feel is important. We believe as a community we should give consideration to the overall impact of the tear down and building of homes culturally, economically, and historically. How will this affect the cultural diversity of Guthrie in the long run? Examples of a dilapidated house that have been thoughtfully restored are attached, in which I have attached them. These homes have been solely responsible for the home value revival since 2014. The community average for period homes went from $79 a square foot on average to $114 per square foot almost overnight. Furthermore, and those were revitalized homes that were in just as bad condition. Furthermore, the LCHS would like to be steadfast, dedicated effort from the city of Guthrie to more strongly enforce the codes and ordinances to maintain uninhabited structures for the preservation until such time that the residences can fully be renovated. For example, maintenance of grounds, boarded up structures, etc. Thank you for your time and consideration moving forward. Regards on the behalf of Logan County Historical Society Board of Directors, Nell Thalassinos.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then I have one other question for Mike. The part, and Elijah, both of you could probably, either of you could answer this. The part that's built on a mud sill, that's not original construction to the house. That was later added on at some point.
Correct.
Okay.
The original house is basically 4 rooms.
Okay. And it was built on the red sandstone?
Correct.
Okay.
So I just have a few comments.
Okay.
I just have a few comments in regards to that letter. Couple things, like our goal is not to just put a house in there that's monolithic, that looks like a cookie cutter, that's, going to look out of place. Like, our goal is to put something back that looks like it's, it looks similar to the other. I know there's a lot of different styles of houses on that street, so we want to put something back in there that looks like it goes with the neighborhood. Also, there's no residents that are going to be pushed out. This house has been vacant for probably 15 years now, so that's not an issue. Like, there's nobody living here that's getting evicted or anything like that. And I know she said something about the square foot price. The new home will be 115, 120. Like, we get that in that range for our remodeled homes, so that's pretty much the same. And also, I lost my train of thought. If if we don't continue with this project, like, the house will probably more than likely just sit there and be a dilapidated home. That's not going to bring a family in. If we are able to move forward with this project and demo the dilapidated house and build something new, like, more than likely we're going to bring a new family into Guthrie that'll be a part of the community rather than push people out. So I personally have remodeled probably 9 homes in Guthrie. That's our first goal is to remodel these homes. It's just when the structure has been get to a point to where it's kind of past the point of no return, then rather than a house just sit there and be dilapidated, we'd rather take it down and build something new that can have a family come in. So like, I think our track record is that we want to remodel when we can. It's just sometimes there's not really that option. So we want the next best thing. So.
I'd just like to say I'm John Naylor. I grew up in construction. I've worked in construction my whole life. And I've been into home, and I was just going to throw out there that I would consider it unsafe the way it is, and that it has been neglected and not kept up for many, many years. And just kind of throw out there that I really don't see there being any reasonable way of salvaging the house. I think it's beyond that and has been for years probably.
Thank you.
Sure.
My name is Sue Ducharme. I'd like to speak to something that Sarah said that she read in that letter, and that's protecting the vacant homes sitting around town. I don't think that the city of Guthrie should hold that responsibility, but the person who owns that home should. If we're going to preserve them up until the day that they are rehabilitated, then the owner of that property should be responsible for it, and the only job the city would have is enforcing that. Now, the previous owner of this house that we're talking about tonight has many other homes sitting around this town rotting away, just like that one did. I have a home across the street from this property, and I have watched it sit there. I've had to report it numerous times because it was not secured. Doors open, anyone going in and out, spending the night there. My concern was they would start a fire in the wintertime. So it has been a community problem for many years, 12 that I know of. So yes, they should be protected. But the city needs to make sure that the people who own the property protect it, not tear it down, but protect it. It's too late for this one, and it may be too late for several others that this individual owns. It would do us good to check on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Carol.
Just for the record.
Come to the microphone. Come to the microphone.
Right. Just to clarify things, by code, economics was not an issue because it doesn't meet any of the code requirements for the commission to approve the demolition, so economics is irrelevant.
Okay, Carol Herzl, 3119 Cedar Ridge Court. I don't know if I need to say anything because if you'll read section 15, you've read so many of these. Does everybody have section 15? Negotiations prior to demolition.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to read it? You've been reading all these other ones.
That has to do with the 60-day period that is
Yeah, and what's it say
necessary.
right after that? This time period is intended?
Yes,
Go
it's
ahead.
intended to discuss the possible, basically salvation of the structure, which had happened. We had, I know you had numerous discussions with the owner, and that you had discussions with city staff, and even at the commission level, even though there wasn't an actual formal meeting, there was still discussions on it. And at the end of the day, it was still looked at as we aren't going to be able to save it.
Okay,
So
can
that's
I
why
read
we're
it
here
then? I
today.
was just asking for you to read it. This time period is intended to permit city staff to discuss the proposed demolition informally with the property owner, other city officials, and preservation organizations to see if an alternative to demolition can be found before a formal consideration of the application by the commission. Sarah mentioned, I mean, I've tried to show you how many houses I've bought that have been rehabbed. The latest one sold for $150,000 last week. I'm not buying these houses because they are rotting down. I'm buying them, and people then take them and make them lovely and worth a lot of money. So back to that, I offered a SOD Foundation, sold this to Elijah. I was totally shocked that he'd want to tear it down, and SOD Foundation will repurchase it. So, and I think there's only 2 streets in the historic district, and I don't know, we've talked about this historic district so much, like I don't think people know what that means. I was told it's a snapshot in time, 1889 to 1910, capital city years. So that's why, is it Victorian or is it this or that? If you want it to look like the way it looked during those years, then you try to save anything you can. And I think the fact that I wanted to try to go with people to say, like, there are 4 rooms that have good foundation, good floors, good joists, good everything. And then there's a terrible part, too. But obviously, we'd tear off the terrible part, and I think that's the only pictures that I noticed. You talk the terrible part, of course, it'd be. Oh,
Picture of every room that's there.
okay, I'm not trying to criticize you, but that's, well, but, the reason I left that on, the back, I took the back off because it was in poor shape, and I wanted to show that the lap and gap siding was on there. And then I left the ones on the side, the bedroom and the bath, just so people would have an idea, okay, this is where a new bath and new bedroom would go. I could have torn it off. So back to I think, are there alternatives to demolition? Yes, there are. And I know in experience, like the SOD Foundation, we were set up as a 501c3 to preserve historic Guthrie, and so is the Logan County Historical Society set up to preserve Guthrie. So I know I sold a house to Elijah, and he did a great job at 320 South First, and he had to tear off the back part of it and rebuild. Is that right? You don't remember that?
I didn't have to tear off any portion of that structure.
The laundry room? Okay, anyway, all right, okay. And then I have a very Victorian house at 318 South 2nd, so that's my other reason for not wanting a new house next to the very Victorian house. Okay, and you all are at a disadvantage because, Lud Lentz was the first chairman of the HP Commission, and just like the thing that we read, no house has ever been torn down because, if you've got somebody that's willing to rehab this, according, I think, what Lud would say, what Charles Scott would say, like, well, my goodness, let's not just start tearing these things down. And its codes have been in place since the 1970s. So, oh, and also, I kind of reached out to 3 or 4 of you about what's wrong with having the plan, actual plan. A concept. It doesn't say anywhere in the code, just come up with a concept. If anybody was willing to say why you didn't want to see the actual plan.
We're not talking about the plan yet, we're just talking about demo right now.
No, but
So we're trying to focus our conversation so we don't get waylaid and shanghaied into something else.
No, I
So
mean-
we're talking about demo right now.
But why not? Why don't you want to see the house that he's going to build?
We have pictures.
What?
We will.
We have pictures.
Pictures from a magazine, but not a floor plan.
We will get there.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
a floor plan.
No, there's a floor plan in the application.
Is it the one that's 2,600?
We'll get there.
Okay, all right.
Carol, could I ask you one question? If Sod Foundation purchased that back from Elijah, do you have somebody lined up that's willing to actually restore the house?
Oh, I'm sure there's several people.
Well, I know, but.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that.
Well,
What? No.
Is there somebody?
Well,
You've already-
like, for instance, Sarah Mathis, I've sold several houses to the Danfords. They then sold it to her husband. I mean, that's what we do. We just keep finding people that are.
If they were to sell it back, I would find somebody within 30 days to purchase that property from the.
house is not for sale.
Yeah.
I don't know
Well,
what to say.
but
Okay.
It's not an option.
My
Thank you,
concern-
Carol.
My concern most about it is the sandstone foundation.
I mean, and
That doesn't look safe to me. So you
And I
have-
think there may be, some ways we can incorporate that sandstone into landscaping and use aspects of it. It's just not, it's not a structurally sound to build. I wouldn't even want to remodel the house on that foundation just because it's been deteriorated to such a point.
That's my question. How can you remodel it if you're gonna have to do a new foundation?
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at. Like regardless
I
of
don't know
whether.
how you can do that.
And that's where I'm at right now, is regardless of whether we get the demo permit to tear it down with excavator, like there's a lot of, the foundation needs to be redone. So like we're gonna pretty much end up at the same point of like having to do a new foundation, new floor joist, and those things from the bottom up. So we're gonna pretty much have to start from the same point, whether we take it down, with a demo permit or just by hammers and crowbars and stuff to get all the rotted and deteriorated wood out and the foundation that needs to be updated as well. So we're pretty much going to have to start from the same point. And I remodel a lot of homes. I have a lot of experience. I probably have more actual construction experience than Carol. So I think I have a better idea of what is salvageable, what can be saved, and when a home gets to a point to where it's pretty much you have to start from scratch. Like I said, I've remodeled at least 9 homes, and I just want to say it again: demolition is never my first goal. Like our goal with my wife and I, we have a business, and our goal is to remodel homes in Guthrie. That's what we love doing. That's what we want to do. But this particular home has just been allowed to get to a point where I don't think that's feasible. So.
Okay, Patrick
I
had
move
a-
that we
yeah.
do
It's like you had a motion a long time ago.
for the second time.
So, anybody?
So I was going to say, so just to recall, you had made a motion to approve the certificate of appropriateness for demolition.
That is correct.
Did that include the conditions that staff had put on there in terms of 1 and 2 for the timeframes of obtaining the permit and that?
Yes.
Okay. So we have a motion.
Before somebody seconds that, I tell you, I'm really, really torn on this. I woke up this morning.
Lynn, have you gone over and looked at the house?
Yes, I have. I've been inside the house.
And you think it can be salvaged?
Well, I don't, I'm not a construction expert. You're the architect, Patrick.
It
so
cannot be salvaged.
I understand. But we are a preservation commission.
And if it was possible to preserve it, I'd
Okay.
be the first to jump in line and say, let's do so. It is not.
And we also.
Let me finish why I'm torn. That was only the one side. I want to see as much of Guthrie preserved as possible. The other side, this is a half block from where I live. I live right down the street from this. And most of the neighbors on that immediate block presented us with letters at the very first hearing we had on this, asking that it be demolished and let Elijah build a new home. Now, they're the ones that are going to be most impacted immediately. The most immediate impact of this is on those neighbors. I don't remember one actual neighbor that showed up in opposition. And if there were one,
They were here, but
I
I don't
apologize
think
to
we-
them, but I don't remember anybody speaking. But we had letters from virtually every neighbor on that street. So, I woke up this morning after reviewing this again over the weekend. This morning, I didn't know which way I was going to vote on this, but I'm really torn. I appreciate Mike's report, and I think his report makes it clear to us that he doesn't think it can be salvaged and really save the house itself. It's not even going to be the house that's there. So.
But, yeah, we do have a motion, so.
We have a motion.
There's a second.
Well, I'm going to second, because the reason why I was against demo in the very first place was because I didn't feel we had enough information and enough of a discussion with the various interests involved in this house. So now that we've gone through all these hoops and we've talked to everybody and everybody's had the time to really evaluate what's going on, I think we're in a better position to make a more confident decision.
Roll call vote.
Okay, vote.
James Hensley,
Me first? Yes.
Aaron Brown,
Yes.
Patrick Kerr,
Yes.
Valerie Duncan,
No.
Adam Ropp,
Yes.
Lynn Bilodeau,
No.
Joe Chappell.
Abstained.
Abstain, so it's a 4, basically, yeah, 4-3, 4-3 pass, motion passes 4-3.
Well, I thank you guys, and I'm looking forward to building something that y'all can all be proud of and that will make Guthrie a better place, so.
So I guess we need to move to the second half.
Yes, now, and a couple things on that.
I want to correct you, it was 4-2. It wasn't 4-3, I
Oh,
abstained.
yeah,
He
I'm sorry. I
abstained.
think by our charter, an abstain counts.
Oh, is
Abstain is a no.
Well, then I
Yes,
didn't
it does.
abstain.
Yeah, yeah, but still, it'll go as abstain, but it would be a 4-3 vote, so.
Okay.
But now the second part, and again, there's a couple things here that the commission, as I've said before, and I can reiterate again, the home does have to have compatibility, size-wise, architecture-wise, and all that with the area in that. And I think that goes on to help some of the concern that we're not going to have a building or a home that is going to be not appropriate for the area.
It's going to be wonderful.
The commission can, I guess, go two avenues, the way I was looking at it from staff. One, to go ahead and approve or give guidance to the applicant on the home. There were pictures provided in that, in our specific home. We as staff will verify, obviously, when he brings in his full plans and his site plans to see if it meets that. If we feel that there's still maybe an issue or it doesn't fully meet, or we don't feel it fully meets, we will bring it back to the commission for you guys to decide. Or you can go the other route and just say, hey, until you have a full set of plans and that and something in concrete, we're not going to make an approval. It's really up to the commission on what you want to do, and I guess your comfort level.
And a couple things I would say to that. I don't know how many of you are familiar with how the building permitting process works. So basically, I get my plans, I take them to Mike, and he has to give the stamp of approval before I can commence with the building. So basically, you know, if we can go ahead and approve the plan process, and I can get my plans, I can get them to Mike, and he can basically be the person that ensures that they are close to some of the pictures that I've presented to you guys. So, you know, that way, because I'm not just, you know, all of a sudden go start building the house, like it has to be approved by the building inspector and, you know, the building codes and everything. So I think that's a way to that you guys can feel comfortable going ahead and approving that, is because, you know, just work with Mike and you know, say, hey, before you approve anything, like make sure it meets, you know, and is close to these pictures that we've, or that I've submitted. So that's my comments on that.
We all like this one.
Well, I think everybody's looking at number 12, attachment. Most of us.
Because this,
Yeah. Like
this is
that
the
one.
picture of the original house. Where's the camera? If he's still paying attention.
He's not.
He's not, he's gone home for the night.
No, I think he's still somewhat in there.
Attachment 12.
11.
Oh, there it is.
There it is.
Attachment,
There
yeah,
it is.
There it
attachment
is.
11 is the house, attachment 12 is the.
So this is the
one that
house
looks most like.
as
Yeah,
it
the
stands.
existing, yep.
Oh, yeah, like 12.
And then 12.
The one, the style that you
I'd
proposed
rather live in that.
is this one.
This,
Yeah,
And I
have
think
another.
they look exactly
Me
the
too.
same.
yeah, for sure.
this one doesn't have a number.
You're
Did I short you on that one? They should have all been the same. Keep going. It's more down the way.
This one,
Yeah.
the one with the actual floor plans in it was the house that you had originally.
Yes, and that was pretty
and-
much irrelevant, like it,
And so that one is the one that I said, that's a 1920s bungalow. We shouldn't do that because that's out of the time frame.
Yeah.
Never mind.
So, yes, it is a gorgeous house, but it's outside of the style, the time frame for the
Yeah.
style.
yeah.
Okay. So which one, 12 you like?
Attachment 12.
I like this one.
Yeah.
I
This
think
one's my favorite.
our goal will be to make the front facade look,
As much like-
you know, as close to the original house as we can. I mean, I think due to building codes and stuff, I think we'll have to do like a garage, which we'll probably try to do that off the alley so that the front integrity and everything looks the same. So that will be our goal, is to make sure, and you guys, you know, we'll make sure Mike has that picture. That way he can, when I bring my plans, he can, you know, see the elevation and, you know, approve or disapprove based on the fact that it looks, you know,
But
as
I'm
close as
not-
possible to the picture.
Original.
But I have to say, I'm not comfortable approving your plan without seeing what your plan is. You say it's going to be as close to the original as possible, but without us seeing your plans, I don't know how we can say that, and it's not appropriate to leave that decision up to anybody else. That's what we exist here to decide.
Within our code, it says, for elevations and all this kind of stuff, we can ask for that. And so I think that once we approve of, what kind of style we would like for him to do, he would then, you need to then go pay the architect to build them, right?
Yeah.
And so then after that, we could.
I'm more than happy to bring him back in October and show you guys.
Because I think that's the whole idea, is to have at least some guidance. So that's the thing, he can get, pretty darn close, if not exactly. So again, when he goes and pays his architect and that to do the plans, he doesn't have something that's going to have to be completely redone when he would present it in that. So that's why I was saying is today you can give him feedback on what you're looking at, or in this case, an agreement there. And then once he gets all his plans together, we can bring it back and say, okay, here's the actual building submittal. Is this appropriate?
Yeah.
And then from that point, he can move forward, obviously, with the construction process.
I think as long as I know that, if it looks very, very similar to the picture there, then I can go pay my architect to do, because plans, they can be $1,000, so I want to make sure that I have something that you guys are going to like before I actually go do that, because I don't want to have to pay an architect to redraw it once it's done.
Is everybody content with this one?
I would,
Since it looks so much like the original?
yeah, I would just like to say that even the people that voted yes, we really don't want to, because we're all historic people. And you've gone through a gauntlet to get this torn down. I'm saying this as just whatever, but I was gonna have a word for it, but I was just gonna say I think that it would be really good for you and your wife in this town and your company, that it would be a really good heartfelt idea to try to stick to something that looks like the original.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure.
So, I professionally know Elijah, and of course, in the beginning, with the LCHS, just like you, our goal is to preserve. And since I was never at the house, I couldn't speak on the dilapidation on that house. That's why I don't want to pick a side. But working like Elijah does, it's really, really expensive to come up with plans beforehand. And a lot of times, especially when you're having to work on a specific lot, if you're looking, I think $1,000 is pretty cheap, actually. It's probably going to be more than that. And so, with 1,100 square feet, there's not a lot you can do with that anyway. So I would encourage the commissioners to go ahead and allow him to start building, because Mike don't play. He's not going to let him. He's not going to let him just get away with anything. I know. So I would just say let him get started, because the longer that lot sits there, the worse it is for the whole community. So if we're going to go that way, we're going to tear it down, which is what we're going to do. Then just allow him to build, just as a realtor and a citizen of Guthrie. Thank you.
The only thing I can say in opposed to that is he's got 10-day waiting period for someone to file an appeal to city council. He's got at least a couple weeks for the architects to be done. We're gonna be to the October 3rd meeting anyway. So if he brought back elevation plans on the October 3rd, that probably wouldn't slow him down more than a week. So if you can give him as much guidance for plans as you can, so he is getting exactly what you're looking for.
And having said that, if you're basically just giving him guidance and that, we don't necessarily need a motion in a second, because we're not approving the certificate of appropriateness at this point. It's just giving him guidance, and then that formal motion and approval would come at the next meeting.
Yeah, and I think you've already heard enough to know that if you come back with plans that are going to end up looking like attachment 12, you're probably good to go.
Okay.
All right.
And so you good, the applicant?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
and I just want to say thank you to all
You bet.
for your patience as we navigated this. I know it was a little tedious, And yeah, just thank you for your time.
Okay, so much for our first item.
Yeah.
Sheree, you should have gone first.
Item 5, HBC application 19-021, discussion and potential action on a request for a certificate of appropriateness for a new projecting sign for Byron's Fiddle Shop and Music Hall and the painting of the entresol area at 209-211 East Oklahoma Avenue, Patriot Industries Building. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see the applicant, I don't think is here, but he wasn't sure if he was going to be able to make it or not. Anyway, as many of you may have seen, this is kind of a follow-up one. This is one where the projecting sign was put up and actually the painting on the entresol was done. However, they're looking to put a black, basically 1.5 foot by 3 foot metal fiddle. It will go on the existing support structure that's already there. All they're putting on is the actual fiddle itself. And then since we were going forth, I added the color change, had him add the color change, so that gets approved too. The picture I think I provided that when it was Patriot Industries, there was on the basically eastern part of it, there was black and black trim, and they just took it and kind of went with it with more black on that side to make it more look like cohesive or more as one building. So the staff did not have any issue with the application and would recommend that the commission approve the certificate of appropriateness.
Okay, any discussion?
You said it's 3 feet by 1 feet? 3 feet?
1.5 by 3. Yeah, 1.5 foot by 3 foot.
It's less than our 4 foot.
Yeah, less than the 4 foot.
I see violations of our ordinance all over town.
James long left, so we can talk about font.
Instead, I'd rather we just move to approve.
I second.
I haven't seen my granddaughter yet. I had a granddaughter.
Okay. Yeah, it was good enough for the microphone.
Per second, okay. Roll call vote, James Hensley?
Yes.
Aaron Brown?
Yes.
Patrick Kerr?
Yes.
Valerie Duncan?
Yes.
Adam Ropp?
Yes.
Lynn Bilodeau?
Yes.
And Joe Chappell?
Yes.
All right, unanimous.
All right. I want to apologize to all items after item number 4 for having to be here so long. Item number, application 19022, discussion and potential action on a request for certificate of appropriateness for new Licorice Man canopy signage and new paint on the front facade and rear exterior for a building located at 112 East Oklahoma. Staff report.
Thank you, as I got all my paperwork all finally mixed up here. There's a couple things the applicant's doing, and as you see, the applicant is here, so I can let her go over it a little bit, but they're looking at a couple things. One, they want to paint the building. I included that as attachment 1. It's a red and black type schematic. Currently, it looks like it's kind of a yellow, very creamish color with some blue. And then the second aspect of it is they're going to remove the projecting sign that's above the canopy and then put signage on the canopy itself.
It's already down. The wind took it out.
Oh, did it? Okay, see, okay, I wasn't sure.
That's done.
Yeah, okay. And then they're going to put the signage on the canopy itself that's existing. And those colors are, they're like, I think she had an origami white that was going to be there, and then a reddish type, I guess, color and some accents. But anyway, you had the pictures of it. Staff did not find any issue with it, and staff would recommend that the application be approved as submitted. But the applicant is here for any questions.
You have anything to add to that? He covered pretty well? Okay.
We are, we're trying to sell our building, so this might be a moot point. If we sell, which, please God, that's the plan. But if we don't, we just want to be ready to move. I don't want to be caught with Christmas coming and not have some kind of signage. So it's just kind of an advanced thing in case the gods do not look down kindly upon us.
Any questions for the applicant? Anyone?
Is the man supposed to be licorice? Is that what that is?
Licorice man, yes.
Yeah, that the man is supposed to be licorice, though? Is that the?
I don't know, no.
Oh, that's what my create. Never mind.
I don't
Never
know.
mind.
It's just my logo.
I thought you were trying to be creative, making the man look like licorice, but I apparently, I'm sorry.
We are open to suggestions.
Yeah, you should say yes. Say, yeah.
Yeah,
fine.
that's it.
Well, so you're going to do this.
My side of the building, yep.
This is going to stay the same?
Stay the same.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to indicate, because she just has the one side. The other side is not going to change. It would be the most eastern side, as you're standing looking at it. Or, I guess, the most adjacent to the YMCA.
And so the tile would be painted red, the tile on
the roof, you mean? Is that what you're?
On the little cupola.
Yeah.
Oh,
The little
it's whatever, I did you a drawing.
Yeah. So
Yeah, now, these were originally built, it was a block of buildings that were built as two separate buildings.
Right.
So even the ornamentation is a little bit different when you look at both buildings together. So we're just wanting to take our section of the building and change it. So the base color, where the red is now on the building that we have now, with all the curly cues, that would be the black portion, and the curly, everything will, it's 5 colors. So everything will be accentuated in the same way that it is now, just changing the colors. And where the red roof will be more like a red tile roof instead of the gray that's on there now on the other one. Excuse me.
All right.
You know, as an architect, we like things to be symmetrical.
Oh, I know. I know.
But they are different.
Patrick's looking at it cross-eyed. It's not going to match.
It's not going to match.
very not.
Unless she can get her neighbor to paint their side red, too.
Well, I think that doesn't go with G Gallery and glass.
the awning, what about all this decoration on the awning? Is
The
that going
front awning will stay, the front part will stay the same. We'll do it the same colors that we do the upper building. The signage will be on the side portions.
Okay.
The background will be, yeah,
The
the back, that's the part that I showed there, yeah. That will be taken down because obviously we'll have a sign there.
Okay.
Anyone?
I'm torn on this one.
How do you feel?
I'm torn on this one.
I'm not in favor.
I don't think that there's really anything wrong with it other than it won't match the other one.
That's my only
And you know, it never has matched the other
I
one
know.
until Charles Scott and us decided to make the match.
Yeah.
Because I have pictures of them all through the ages where they were different. So they've never been the same until we decided to do that.
Do you remember what they used to look like? Over here.
Mainly when we first bought the building, ours was, I can't remember which one was which. One of them was kind of not accentuated at all. It was just subtly painted. And it was a rose color. The other one was cream. So it didn't have any of the detail work painted or anything. It was just plain. That was when it was McVickers and the Radio Shack. Prior to that, it was the Western Auto. And when it had the Western Auto, it had a lot of red going on. So it's been many different things. But I started to bring the picture, but it's kind of big, of an old picture of it. It was a black and white, but you can see that they were different colors. And that was probably from, I don't know, the early 1900s is when that picture was taken.
Yeah, and if I can add as staff, I know it's difficult because they look the same, but they are two different buildings. And I guess if we go down a road to where you want to make each building look the same, we will choose one color and everybody will paint it as such and we will be done.
And my take on it is I think it would look spectacular looking at that block from the corner. Our block, you know, we have a lot of buildings in dire need, as you all know, and because we have owners that don't appropriately take care of them. So from our corner, when you look at our buildings, I think we have the most beautiful buildings, Glenda and I, in town. They're fabulous buildings. And I think the view of two different buildings would just pop on that street. I think it would be beautiful. And I love my building, so I don't want to do anything that won't draw oohs and ahs.
And I realize we didn't have any color cameras in 1889.
Exactly.
1900. Any indication, any history? Does anybody have any idea what the colors were
All
on
I
these two
know
buildings?
is that all you can really tell in the photographs that I have are the roofs, the slant part on the top of the Oriole. One looks really white and one is dark.
Very dark.
So they were totally
They were
opposite.
contrasting during the
they
territorial
were.
days. Okay.
I don't see how we can keep
I
a business owner from
agree.
changing their building just because the neighbor's got it.
Right.
Right, 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 I
That's why I
agree.
said that's a tough
agree.
precedent.
That's going
that you would
back.
have.
Well, if
Because
you
then
do that, I
somebody's gotta
suggest
tell
you
the
make Glenda
YMCA
change
that they
hers,
got
you know.
to.
Yeah.
I make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Bilodeau.
It's your
second-
fault that you ever made them
Patrick,
symmetrical.
Second by Aaron.
It's what?
It's your fault that you made the match. from the
It
first-
is, and we put up
Right.
the awning,
Yeah.
so, you know, all of this is our fault.
All right, we had a motion by Bilodeau, a second by Brown. Roll call vote, James Hensley,
Yes.
Aaron Brown,
Yes.
Patrick Kerr,
No.
Mallory Duncan,
Yes.
yes, Adam Ropp,
Yes.
Lynn Bilodeau,
You were
Yes.
so on my bad list.
Joe Chappell.
I abstain.
Okay,
Again?
Yeah.
Do you know
so that's all right, it's still,
He does know everybody.
there was still 5 votes, so, yeah, it passed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Just
staying
pray
with
for
us.
the sale of my building, okay? And then you'll have to deal with someone else.
Well, are you going to have a covenant that they have to continue selling German licorice? Whoever buys it? Okay.
Thanks for hanging around this
Thank
late.
you.
Yes,
Sorry
sorry
you
you
had to
had
wait
to
so
do
long.
that. Item number 7 is HPC application 19023, discussion and potential action on a request for a certificate of appropriateness for a new building and awning signage for the City of Guthrie Tourism Office for a building located at 308 South Division.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was going to do.
I was going to say, last
Ready, ready.
but not least, we
We're
have
all in a
we have,
bad mood
Yeah,
now.
Still got the Hoboken.
We have Justin, as is indicated, as most of you may know, we moved our tourism office to this building. A month or two ago, they got approval to paint it, now they're coming back for signage. They're looking to put signage on the existing canopy, the front and both sides, and then the building itself will have window signage on each of the window panes, as well as a visitor information on the building itself. I just want to add that the building is a general resource. It was built sometime, I think, in the 50s in that, so the lettering font that they're proposing is more appropriate for a modern building.
And just to clarify, the 3 signs that are going to be like 2 on the, what was it, canopy? That was the word.
yeah.
Canopy, and then 1 on the building. Those are, it had those 3 signs before. We just took the old ones down when we painted it. We're just putting up the same size signs that were there, those 3. I should do this?
Yeah, I was
So-
getting ready to say, Justin, you got that microphone adjusts.
Yes. So just 3 signs going back where the 3 signs were. In addition to the window lettering on the glass.
What about the metal frame out front? Isn't that an interesting question coming from me?
Yes, the metal frame looks really cool and also expensive. Maybe that would be a cool project eventually.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Not in the
Yes.
budget.
The lighted frame on
Yeah,
front, like the
up front.
backlit.
Yeah, the box.
deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the front?
It's not in the budget.
Right. Not in this budget.
I'm just curious, what color are you going to make all these?
Okay, yeah, good question. The 3 signs, like the 2 on the canopy, 1 on the building, like the white, the previously approved origami?
Origami white,
Yes. White with black lettering on it. And then the window lettering will be the origami white lettering on that. So,
Kind of like the door now. Like the door has a C on it or something.
yeah, it has the H Hoboken Coffee Roasters letters on there.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Which I can't remember exactly what color those are.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Motion by Brown,
I'll second.
You think you're just flying by.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
piece of cake. You guys are so hungry right now?
You should have gone first.
You're like, get out of
You should
here.
have gone first. All these people should have gone first.
I think we're all ready for a couple of beers.
Okay, roll call. We had a motion by Brown, a second by Duncan. Roll call vote. James Hensley?
I abstain. Yes.
You guys have already had a couple beers tonight.
Aaron Brown?
Yes.
Patrick Kerr?
Yes.
Valerie Duncan?
Yes.
Adam Ropp?
Sure. Yes.
Yes.
Joe Chappell?
Yes.
All right,
I
unanimous.
had to give Justin his shirt.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. All right, thank you.
Any comments from staff?
No, the only thing I wanted to add is thank you, Commission, for your patience and all of that. I hope to, and the same thing, that the crowd really isn't here, but even at staff's perspective, it's not our intent to look lightly upon any demolition or any building in that regard, but obviously, we're here to provide the resources and knowledge in that for you guys to make the best decision possible. So obviously, on today's item, that's what we did, and we will continue to do.
Thank you.
Any other comments from commissioners?
Better not be.
Better not be.
Anyone? Well, I have.
He says
I
no.
have 20-page monologue, I think.
I have one. I just think that this whole process, and as it has been tedious and it has been long, but I think it shows Guthrie's commitment to its history. And you can't save everything, but we will always try to save what we can. And so I appreciate all the work that staff did and the commissioners. So anyway,
I agree.
any other comments? If not, meeting is adjourned.